from the Test Match special team. But here on 5 Live Sport at 2 o'clock, we'll have full commentary of the Austrian Grand Prix. So that'll be a choice of listening for you across 5 Live Sport and 5 Sports Extra on BBC Sounds. In terms of the F1 this afternoon, Red Bull's Max Verstappen is on pole position. He also claimed victory in yesterday's sprint race. So let's say good afternoon for the first time today to the 5 Live Formula One team. And that is Jack Aitken, Andrew Benson and Harry Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Ali. Yes, it is race day in Austria at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg for the 9th round of the year, surrounded by the grassy mountain range of Styria, which is about an hour outside of Graz. It's dry, a bit overcast, with white puffy clouds interrupting the blue sky overhead. The grandstands are absolutely packed to the rafters around this, the shortest track on the calendar. And the Red Bull entertainment package is also in full force for the fans. We've just had 3 people doing half a lap or so on jetpacks. They're still going around, actually, and there's usually a bit of an air show as well as we get closer to lights out. Certainly a jam-packed day. Plus, as you mentioned, a bit of a change-up in the weekend schedule. We had the sprint race yesterday. Verstappen won it, but that was yesterday. Today is a new day, but the Dutchman still leads the championship now by 70 points to his teammate Sergio Perez, and Red Bull lead the way in the Constructors' Championship, having won every race so far this year with a whopping 168-point gap. And to discuss it all and call you through the race, we have all of the action covered by the former Williams driver Jack Aitken. And Jack, mentioning the entertainment package, the stands absolutely packed to the rafters. It's a sea of orange. You've been here before, you've raced here before as well, and I'm trying to look as to, you told me you've won it here before, but I can't find the stats to prove it online.
Erased from the history books, clearly. Yeah, it's a special place. It's probably the prettiest circuit that we go to on the calendar, set right into the side of a mountain, basically, and it's close enough that you get the Orange Army in full force, as you've mentioned, and you really feel their presence. They are a pretty loud bunch and make their voices heard. So Max is going to be benefiting from that this weekend, and it's nice to see the grandstands full.
The flags are waving, there's cheering in the stands, and Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, is also here with me. Now, I was talking about the jetpackers making their way round. I think we just witnessed a bit of a shunt for one of them.
We've seen the first shunt of the day, Harry, haven't we? Yes, with one of the jetpack riders had a bit of a crash landing, and Oscar Piastri was watching in the McLaren pit and pulled a bit of a worried face for him. He waved to the crowd as he limped off, and I don't know what was wrong with him, but it went a bit wrong for him, that one. We'll have to see whether that happens at the first corner or the first lap when the Grand Prix gets going.
Yeah, so we did see images of him walking away, so a bit of a worrying start there, but everybody applauding him from the stands as he walked away. This, though, is how the grid will line up. It is, of course, Max Verstappen on pole position, his 4th consecutive pole of the year, ahead of Leclerc in the Ferrari, then Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari is 3rd, Norris in the McLaren is 4th, Hamilton is 5th, Stroll, Alonso, Hülkenberg, Gasly, Albon the top 10, Russell, Ocon, Piastri, Bottas, Perez from 15th, Tsunoda, Zhou Guanyu and Logan Sargent, the 18 drivers that'll start on the grid with Kevin Magnussen in the Haas and Nick De Vries making changes to their cars, him De Vries in the AlphaTauri, starting from the pit lane. Now, Jack, we kind of have to rule out Verstappen, don't we? He's ahead. He won by over 20 seconds yesterday in the shorter race. So you can only imagine it's going to be even more of a pain for everybody else in the field today. Ferrari's alongside him, though, and there's a little bit of hope because their race pace has been looking decent in the last couple of rounds.
Yeah, and in practice, they were looking pretty strong race pace-wise again. Less than, they're very, very close, basically, through practice. And it's an encouraging sign. However, this has been the story of Ferrari through this championship so far this year, that they've showed promising pace, but when it comes to Sunday and the Grand Prix, it all kind of falls apart. Max doesn't seem to be making many mistakes at the moment. He seems to be, comfortable with the car, comfortable with his position, and the strategy has been on point for them as well. So, yeah, I tend to agree. It looks like a pretty safe bet for Max today. His closest competitor, you'd normally say, would have been Perez in the sister Red Bull, the same machinery, but he had a shocker in qualifying, and he's starting all the way down in 15th, as you say, and we're going to be looking, I think, at the battle for 2nd and 3rd place.
Yeah, Charles Leclerc, who's second on the grid in the Ferrari, he did an absolutely spectacular qualifying lap on Friday, but even he was saying yesterday that Verstappen's in a bit of a league of his own at the moment. I don't think they'll try, obviously, the Ferrari drivers, and they do have an advantage by having the two of them up there with Carlos Sainz in third place as well, strategically to potentially play some games with Verstappen and Red Bull, but that relies on them being as quick as him, and I don't think that many people probably expect that to be the case. Behind them, there's quite an interesting few battles looming, I would think. Lando Norris is, like Leclerc, did a brilliant qualifying lap to go fourth in the upgraded McLaren, but McLaren they're talking about highs and lows this weekend. They have made progress with their developed car, but they've still got high tyre wear in races, so they expect to go backwards. So I think we're looking at Lewis Hamilton in fifth, followed by the two Aston Martins, with Lance Stroll unusually ahead of Fernando Alonso on the grid, to be moving forward. And I think that the Mercedes and the Aston Martins will be expected to challenge the Ferraris as the race goes on.
Yeah, certainly will be. Lewis Hamilton going from fifth. There's a really nice fight in the constructors between Mercedes and Aston Martin, though, over second in the constructors. Just a couple of points. It's 5 points between the two of them at the moment in the constructors battle. So Alonso going from seventh was looking very strong in the race yesterday, trying to find a way through on Stroll. But that midfield pack, Jack, is so tight. We had a bit of a sensational race from Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas yesterday, up into the second place. I'm not going to call it a podium place because it doesn't count if you finish in second in the sprint. He then did fall back, but that's actually improvement from the Haas, do you think? Because they've been really struggling in race conditions compared to their qualifying.
Definitely. I mean, the changeable conditions did play to their hands a little bit. I think they were starting to fall back pretty aggressively in the middle part of that race when the Inters were starting to overheat on the drying surface. They then made that brilliant call to switch to the slicks. It worked out very well for them. Nico drove a stunning race, so I was very happy for them. Have to say, I'm actually slightly pleased he didn't get the podium or faux podium in the sprint race, because that would have been a bit gutting, wouldn't it? Yeah. I think everyone in the paddock wants to see that man get on the podium properly, and yeah, we're still waiting for that day.
Absolutely. Well, work to do then for his teammate, who is down starting from the pit lane, but Nico Hülkenberg gets a top 8 start ahead of Gasly and Albon that round out the top 10. Now, Andrew, George Russell starts from 11th, but I believe he's also got a new set of soft tyres in his locker as well, which might come in handy in terms of a bit of tyre strategy, depending on how the race plays out. Am I clutching at straws here?
I think you are a bit, Harry. First of all, Russell was just admitting he was lacking pace in the dry conditions on Friday. Secondly, the soft tyres not expected to really feature in the race. Degradation is high around the Red Bull ring. It's expected to be the medium and the hard tyre, just a question of whether it's one stop or two.
Well, Russell will have a bit of work to do going from 11th. Both Mercedes with work to do in yesterday's sprint, but made the move stick when it counted in those changeable conditions. Who else should we have a little look at further down the pack? Jack, Sergio Perez, we noted him already, but it is 15th. He got his elbows out early doors in yesterday's sprint. He's really going to have to get his elbows out to make his way into the points today.
Yeah, he's under a huge amount of pressure. Over the last 5 races, he's not been performing well. It's starting to bubble up into the press, and Red Bull have traditionally been quite ruthless with their drivers when they've underperformed, so he knows that he's going to have to make quick work of the grid today, using that superior machinery that Max is showing is, you know, the class of the field. If he doesn't, it's going to just, you know, add another brick into the wall of, you know, lack of confidence that Red Bull will have in him.
And Andrew, just lastly, there was a bit of sad news coming into this weekend as well, with the passing of the young racing driver Delano van der Hoff in Spa. A lot of the drivers, in fact nearly all of them, all wearing black armbands on their arms, and we're going to have a minute's silence as well. So a great showing from the F1 community, but a devastating loss, highlighting once again how dangerous motorsport still is.
That's right, and there's an investigation going on by the FIA at the moment, the governing body, about that accident at Spa, because the Belgian Grand Prix is coming up in 3 or 4 weeks' time, and they want to make sure that they've covered all their bases before the Formula 1 cars go racing on what is one of the fastest and most dangerous circuits in the world.
Certainly is. Well, all the drivers and Formula 1 paying their respects. But as we get ready then for lights out and the Orange Army really packing out the grandstands, it will be Max Verstappen, who has his 4th consecutive pole of the year, alongside Charles Leclerc, and the action getting going from 2 o'clock here on 5 Live, Ali.
Yes, thank you guys. Lights out in just over 20 minutes time. Full commentary of the Austrian Grand Prix on the way here on 5 Live, but I cannot emphasise enough your choice of listening this off. It is gripping. You cannot take your eyes or ears off it, but if you're a Formula One fan, then you will be listening to 5 Live Sport right now, because we are going to take you to Austria. The Austrian Grand Prix is about to get underway. I'm going to hand you over to Harry Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Ali, and I would be lying to say if we didn't have the cricket on in the background as well, but don't you worry, we'll be bringing you all the updates throughout the Grand Prix action as well. But it is race day here in Austria. We are at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg for the 9th round of the year in the shadow of the Styrian Mountains, about an hour outside of Graz. It's dry, a bit overcast, with some white puffy clouds interrupting the blue sky overhead. The grandstands are absolutely packed to the rafters with a sea of orange. The Dutch fans out in force for Max Verstappen at this, the shortest track on the calendar. The Red Bull Entertainment package has been and gone with some jetpacks, people on jetpacks doing laps, had a bit of an air show as well. One of the jetpack racers having a bit of a shunt actually, but he walked away with a smile on his face nonetheless. And as we get underway for the formation lap, well, this is how the standings look at the moment. It is Max Verstappen with a 70-point gap at the top of the Drivers' Championship to his teammate Sergio Perez. In the Constructors, it is Red Bull, having won every single race so far this year, have a 168-point gap at the top of the Constructors in front of Mercedes and Aston Martin, who are embroiled in a really tight fight for second at the moment. And that's the story of Formula One, really, quite at this stage. The mid-pack and everybody behind Verstappen and Red Bull. The battles are absolutely fascinating. But we are well underway for this formation lap now. Joining me to talk us through all the coverage is the former Williams racing driver, Jack Aitken. And before we do that, though, we are going to go to on board. This is the sound of the Aston Martin of Alonso, with him starting from 7th on the grid, Jack. But what are we expecting for the Grand Prix this weekend?
I think we're going to be hard-pressed to see a winner other than Max Verstappen. He's been looking in imperious form, not just this weekend, but through this season, really. His closest competitor normally in the same machinery, Sergio Perez, is starting all the way down in 15th after an absolutely torrid qualifying, where he lost a huge number of laps to track limits, which has been an ever-present topic this weekend, and always is at the Red Bull Ring. But it's going to be a close fight behind, and you never know what could happen.
You never know. Well, starting on pole will be Max Verstappen alongside Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari is third. Lando Norris, with anti-stall issues in yesterday's sprint, will go from fourth in his upgraded McLaren. Lewis Hamilton rounds out the top 5 ahead of the 2 Aston Martins of Stroll and Alonso. Hulkenberg in the Haas is 8th in front of Gasly's Alpine and 9th, and Alex Albon rounds out the top 10. In 11th is George Russell in front of Esteban Ocon. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren is 13th. Valtteri Bottas is 14th. Sergio Perez, as Jack says, work to do from 15th on the grid in his Red Bull in front of AlphaTauri's Yuki Tsunoda. Zhou Guanyu is 17th, and the Williams driver and Logan Sargent will go from 18th on the grid. And the last of the runners on the actual grid, because Kevin Magnussen in the Haas has changed his suspension setup, so he starts from the pit lane, and Nick De Vries in the AlphaTauri has changed a load of power unit elements along with his suspension, will go from right behind the Dane, also in the pit lane. As we see the blue Williams of Logan Sargent making his way around the final corner. Tyre selection, well, everybody is on the medium compound of tyre, bar Alonso and Bottas, along with Kevin Magnussen in the pits, who will go from the Haas. Cricket at the moment, update 251 for 6. England need 121 more to win. Right now we'll bring you updates across 5 Live. But right now, it is the Austrian Grand Prix. It's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing in Austria. And it's a good start from the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, who immediately cuts across the scarlet red Ferrari of Charles Leclerc as the orange flares erupt from the grandstands. It's Verstappen who leads out of turn 1, weaving left and right to try and break the toe from Leclerc's Ferrari. Sainz in the second Ferrari is slotted behind him, but is having to defend from the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. Lando Norris under pressure behind in his McLaren from the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, who's managed to get his teammate early doors. Good running for these first couple of laps, but Verstappen, though, leads from Leclerc, who was trying round the outside into the right-hander of turn 4. Risky business for Leclerc. The gravel is to your left. We've got an AlphaTauri off into the gravel right at the back of the pack. A yellow flag will come out for that, but Verstappen withstands Leclerc's attack, and now the Monegasque is having to look in his rear-view mirrors because Sainz, his teammate, is right behind him.
That was Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri who went off skating through the gravel at turn 4, just tried to get on the brakes too late and found the rear of the field coming up to him pretty quickly. We've still got battles, and it's a safety car.
Yeah, that has brought an immediate safety car out then. So the AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda went off into the gravel. We didn't see what the end result of that was, but that has brought out the safety car as we end lap 1 of 71 here in Austria.
I think that the safety car may not be for Tsunoda because he's got him going again. He says that he's got damage, but we do have a yellow flag through the early part of the lap, and it looks like there may have been contact at the rear of the field. Kevin Magnussen is stopped on track, I think, somewhere, and it looks like there's a lot of debris coming out of turn 1 and on the run up to turn 3.
So this is the sound of the Haas just coming into the pits for a quick tyre change. Our timing screens have gone a bit haywire because they said Kevin Magnussen's up in the top 8 right now, but he's not. He started from the pit lane, so he's plumb last, only in front of Tsunoda, and this is the sound as they remove the front wing from that AlphaTauri and change all 4 tyres. The mechanics on the front of that car tweaking the nose as well, and the marshals then collecting a bit of debris. Here's what Perez has to say.
There might be some debris at turn 1. Might be debris at turn 1.
We have a huge number of marshals out on the exit curve of turn 1, just grabbing bits of carbon where people have run into each other, and the damage on Tsunoda's car just looked like it was an end plate on the front wing that had been completely snapped off, basically, which does rob the car of a lot of downforce and performance. And they're running the safety car through the pit lane, such as the number of marshals on track at turn 1 working there.
Yep, so clearly was a significant amount of debris there. Well, this is how it looked after the end of lap 1. Verstappen leads Leclerc, Sainz in 3rd, Hamilton and Norris the top 5. Alonso, Hülkenberg is 7th in front of Stroll, Gasly and Albon the top 10. Russell in 11th, Ocon, Perez, Zhou, Piastri and Sargent the top 16. Bottas, De Vries and then Magnussen and Tsunoda 19th and 20th, having had to come into the pits for damage and tyre changes, as we get another look at how the race started. And it was a good start from Verstappen, who was very aggressive from the off.
Yeah, he cuts straight across the nose of Leclerc because he knows he's had a good launch. Leclerc tucks in behind, uses all the width on the way in to try and get a good exit for the run up to turn 3 because they know that it's a crucial braking zone. And we see the AlphaTauri, it looks like, of Bottas tripping over people as you get the concertina effect into the braking zone. We're on board with him now. He's on the inside going up to turn 1. He's got Piastri alongside him and just gets into the middle of a sandwich between Tsunoda. That's where he loses his end plate on the back of was that the McLaren of Piastri, and goes straight onto the floor of Bottas.
Valtteri Bottas has an unfortunate streak of running over other people's debris in his Alfa Romeo. This was the sound on board the AlphaTauri. We just saw him. He was really squeezed on the inside of the apex. Didn't really have many other places to go, and in front of him was the car, and I think it was the McLaren of Piastri, and there was the damage, and Tsunoda withstanding it. Coming through turn 3, he's now tucked up behind the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, gets in the tow, and I think we're about to hear him slide off into the gravel. He takes the outside line into the downhill braking zone of 4 and is a bit too late on the brakes.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit of an odd move there because he was late on the brakes to try and outbrake the car next to him, saw the rear end of what looked like Gasly coming up to him very quickly and just bailed out extremely fast. It was actually the back of Ocon that he hit in turn 1.
Well, sorry,
late on the brakes while he had a damaged front wing as well. He wasn't using his brain there, was he?
That's the voice of the BBC Chief F1 writer Andrew Benson, who is also alongside the former Williams driver Jack Aitken and myself, Harry Benjamin, here for the Austrian Grand Prix. OK, then we're on lap 3 of 71. The safety car has come in, and Max Verstappen is now leading the pack, and away he goes. Accelerates up through the gears on the approach to the right-hander of turn 9. The pit lane entry is to your right. The sun is shining. The fans are out in full force. The grandstand's absolutely packed with a sea of orange here for the Dutchman, who crosses the line, and we are back to green flag racing. It's Verstappen followed by the 2 Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz. Hamilton and Norris the top 5. A much better start for Lando Norris in the McLaren compared to his sprint race start yesterday, getting caught up in the kerfuffle that was going on between Verstappen and Perez, and sadly getting into anti-stall. But as we get restarted, then it's a clean start for Verstappen and Leclerc with a bit of moving on in the background. We will have all the F1 action across the next 71 laps or so here on 5 Live, but we are keeping you regularly updated with what's going on in the second Ashes test, and I believe we have an update now.
Incredibly, Ben Stokes continues to lay waste to the Australian bowling. Every single Australian fielder out on the boundary, and Ben Stokes keeps smashing it past them. 268 for 6 at the moment, England, Stephen Finn, 103 to win. It's quite incredible what we're witnessing.
It's phenomenal, really. Australia belligerent with their approach, bang it in halfway down, trying to get Ben Stokes to make a mistake, and he's hit one up in the air here, but lands a considerable way short of the fielders dashing in. It really is extraordinary. Every single fielder is positioned out on the outer boundary, and the only people in the middle of the playing surface are the 2 umpires, the 2 batters, the bowler and the wicket keeper. It's unprecedented, but Ben Stokes looks determined, and with 103 to get, this is going to go down to the wire.
He has done it before. Just when you think it couldn't get any crazier, it continues to do so. Ball by ball commentary continues on Sports Extra. England 268 for 6. Back to the Austrian Grand Prix.
Albon looking like he...
Welcome back to the Austrian Grand Prix coverage here. Lap 5 of 71, and we had a safety car intervention after the end of the first lap due to debris on track. It was Yuki Tsunoda involved in that AlphaTauri, but we are now back with green flag racing. Verstappen leads by 1.2 seconds from Leclerc, half a second in front of Sainz. Hamilton and Norris, the top 5. Alonso, Hülkenberg, Stroll, Gasly and Albon, the top 10. We've been listening and seeing Sergio Perez in the second of the Red Bulls, who has got ground to make up. He started 15th, he's up to 12th, and has just displaced Esteban Ocon, and he's now got George Russell on the Mercedes in his vision, just half a second in front of him. Round the final 2 corners then of this Austrian Grand Prix. In lap 5, this is the sound of the Red Bull of Sergio Perez making the move down the inside of Esteban Ocon, down through the gears, up into turn 3, the highest part on this circuit, 4.3 kilometres, 2.6 miles, just 10 turns, the shortest on the calendar. And now we hear Kevin Magnussen in the Haas right at the back of the field after coming into the pits early doors. He started in the pit lane, he just tries to go round at the outside of Nick De Vries's AlphaTauri in the right-hander of turn 4, and De Vries wasn't really having any of that, Jack, was he?
No, fiercely defending that 19th position. I mean, it was always an optimistic move by Magnussen going around the outside. He wasn't quite fully alongside, and De Vries was very quick to show him where the gravel was on the exit of that corner. But now jumping back up to the head of the field, looking further down, the closest gaps are still really between the midfield runners. We've already got a little bit of spread happening towards the front between Verstappen, the Ferraris and Hamilton. But it's fiercely contested further down, and Perez is in the thick of it. He's trying to follow the Mercedes of Russell, but can't quite keep the rear of that Red Bull under him as he goes through turn 7 and heading now down into turn 9. He has to deal with the dirty wash of air from all of these cars in front of them. It's so crucial to these cars to get clean air on the nose.
This is the sound of Sergio Perez on the main straight. He rips a tear off from his visor and chucks it out of the cockpit, and then before you know it, he's into the braking zone of the right-hander of turn 1. Meanwhile, this is what Lando Norris has to say.
Again, Hamilton, that's his 3rd time. We're on it.
So that's the point I was going to raise. It doesn't look like the stewards are being quiet or anywhere near as hot on track limits as they have been during the qualifying sessions. We haven't had any notifications at all yet, and I've seen a few cars off already. That is normally the case. They are usually more lenient during the race, but Norris trying to get any advantage he can and desperately making the call to his team to bring it to the attention of the stewards.
Further up, the 2 Ferraris are having a nice little scrap. Sainz has so far this weekend looked like he just had that little bit more pace, especially being on the back foot in the sprint shootout yesterday with brake-by-wire issues. Only could get 1 lap in when it counted, and it put him P1. He's currently behind his teammate Leclerc, who rounds the final corner, and as he clatters down, the sparks fly from underneath that Ferrari. Just 6/10 between the 2 Ferraris, though. Actually, make that 4/10 over the line.
Yeah, big slide from Leclerc on the exit of turn 1, and as you say, the gap is already closed. DRS cracks open for Sainz. He's tracking him all the way up the long straight to turn 3. probably not close enough here, but he shapes up, shows his nose anyway, and this is going to be where he really wants to get the move done. He's getting a good exit out of turn 3. He's got another DRS zone now down to turn 4, but it doesn't look like he's quite going to be close enough. It could be a late one.
The drag reduction system, the rear wing on these cars opens in the allotted areas on this track, the main straights, and if you're in the second of the car in front of you, you can activate it. Sainz does, but he's not close enough to make the move. We've been talking all year long about this epic battle in the midfield, and it rages on right now here in the Austrian Grand Prix, and it involves Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, who's currently in 8th, trying to keep the Alpine, who you'll be right on board with now. You can hear Gasly in 9th, making his way through the left-hander of 7, which quickly comes to the right-hander of 8. He's just under 4 tenths behind the Haas. He tried to make a move down the inside of turn 4, couldn't make it happen. They'll get another go with DRS, but then just behind them are Albon, Russell, Perez, Ocon, all within mid-tenths.
I think you can see it. Okay, I don't need to let you know.
So that's Sainz making his case for a position swap. In case you guys can't read between the lines there, it's the driver saying, look, I'm faster, we're on the same team here, let me through, I can go down and go and chase Verstappen down. I think that would be a bit optimistic, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And now we have Russell and Perez fighting into turn 3 side by side. Perez on the outside, Russell defending that quite nicely, but now he's going to have him on his back into turn 4 as well. They both have DRS though, so that negates Perez's advantage somewhat.
Well, we'll see. The Mexican is trying to show his nose down the inside, maybe down the outside. He chooses the outside, but he's not alongside Russell enough to make anything happen. Verstappen leads now by over 2.5 seconds from the 2 Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz. Hamilton and Norris make up the top 5. Then comes Alonso, Stroll and Hülkenberg, and Lance Stroll, the Aston Martin, has just a few moments ago got through on the Haas of Hülkenberg. Brave move down the inside of 3, forced the Haas to lock up and run wide.
Yeah, he's now got dirt and dust on his tyres that he has to try and shake off as well, but uncharacteristic little mistake there from Hülkenberg, and could have easily cost him more than that. We have had our first track limits warnings for Hamilton and Alonso, 1 each respectively, and shows that they are still looking at it, even if it's not quite as stringent as it was before.
Well, whilst we're enjoying the F1 action here on 5 Live, we are keeping you updated regularly with what's going on in the second Ashes test, with England only needing 100 more runs to win. Meanwhile, down the inside here in Austria is Sergio Perez on George Russell.
We stick with the plan, no attack for now.
Side by side for Russell and Perez on the downhill approach to turn 4. They both have DRS, but it's the Mexican in the Red Bull who has the inside line, late on the brakes. Can the British Russell in the Mercedes try and get the up and under? No, he can't. Perez has too much speed. Perez gets the move done, up into 11th. Russell down to 12th.
Perez making good work. He's sort of not had one big jump on the first lap as he probably would have been hoping, but he's working his way through the cars at a decent rate. I have to say, making quicker progress than I expected to Russell. He's now got the Williams of Albon ahead of him. Unfortunately for him, the Williams is one of the quickest in a straight line. It's an absolute rocket, so he's going to have his work cut out for him there.
Just when I look away, there's always something heating up in the mid-pack here in Formula 1 as Norris is closing in on Lewis Hamilton for 4th place, and it is still heating up nicely in the second Ashes test as well. 99 more runs for England now to win. You can hear that in full over on 5 Sports Extra. We will be giving you updates regularly across this Grand Prix. Here is Norris.
Every time Hamilton goes off, please report it.
I mean, he's going off every lap everywhere. I'm not going to talk the whole time.
Track limits chat then from Lando Norris, who has seen Lewis Hamilton run outside the white lines on the edge of this track, all 4 wheels across the line. In qualifying, that is your lap deleted because you are gaining an advantage, and if he does that too many times in the race and the stewards notice it, and Norris is absolutely on the radio complaining about it, a penalty may well come Lewis Hamilton's way.
Absolutely. Now we're on board with Gasly, who's shaping up Hülkenberg. He's next in line to try and get past the Haas, and just shows his nose sort of optimistically at turn 3, and it happens for him. Nico gives him the space and doesn't fight it too hard. So Hülkenberg clearly trying not to lose too much time as these faster cars come through him. And we are getting warning, well, not quite a warning, but we're getting track limit notifications for Hamilton, and Hulkenberg has jumped into the pit lane.
Yeah, and on lap 12, Hulkenberg comes into the pits then. He is first in, so we'll see what Hulkenberg does. We mentioned there's action going on at Lords, and we can hear all about it from Eleanor Oldroyd.
It is still going here, the England innings, 276 for 6, so 95 more needed to win. The ask is to double figures. Stephen Finn alongside me. I think Australia have really annoyed England here. Ben Stokes is making them pay.
If you fired up the Lord's crowd to make them boo and hiss, then you've done something, yes, and Ben Stokes is following suit. He defends one back down the track to Pat Cummins here, but he's been going ballistic, 4s and 6s, one-handed 6s, and is he going to do it again? 95 more runs needed.
And the Australians have been making mistakes as well. We saw a drop catch from Steve Smith. The atmosphere sitting outside here is pretty feral. I've never known Lords like it, but 95 more needed to win. It's still a long way off, but Ben Stokes is on 132, Stuart Broad 10, England 276 for 6.
And you can keep up to date with all the cricket action from the second Ashes test over on 5 Sports Extra, and we will be providing you with as many updates as we can here on 5 Live. But right now we are going for live coverage of the Austrian Grand Prix. It's lap 13 of 71, and there are fights developing everywhere you look at the moment, and particularly one between the two Ferraris in second and third, and for over fourth and fifth, Hamilton and Norris. And Hamilton has got to be careful here, Jack, because he is getting very dangerous with his track limits usage. He is exceeding the track more times than he should be. Let's hear from him.
Okay, Lou, so we now have a black and white flag for track limits. It's turn 10.
They can't keep it on the track, we can't turn.
It's not an excuse, is it? The stewards won't care about how he's achieving that. It's, just not their problem. So he has to keep it between the white lines, and it's a big problem for him, as we see a problem for Hulkenberg.
It's Hulkenberg. Yellow flag is out in sector 2, and he has peeled off the track and parked it up. There is steam flying off the tyres on that Haas as he takes the wheel out and plants it on the front of his car. Let's hear from him.
Lost power.
No power then for Hulkenberg. It looks like exactly the same place where Carlos Sainz had his issues with the Ferrari last year. That time the Ferrari was engulfed in flames and starting rolling down the hill. The undulations here so massive, the elevation change well over 60 metres. But here's Sainz.
Okay, I have pace, guys. Let me try maybe. Go on for Max.
I mean, I still think that's extremely optimistic. They're already 5 seconds back from Verstappen, and if Carlos was that much faster than Leclerc that he could fight with Verstappen, he would have overtaken him anyway. So this is really just talking about the order of second and third at the moment, and understandably Ferrari are just saying, let's keep it calm, save your tyres, and let's see what happens later in the race.
But is Sainz worried that the longer he stays this close behind Leclerc without getting in front? Oh, hang on, here's Hamilton.
Which corner is it? Turn 10. Turn 10. Just have a look at those, because that's some of the course.
Okay, that was Lewis Hamilton then, who is well aware that he is struggling to keep the car on track and exceeding the track limits. Meanwhile, we have Nico Hulkenberg Haas out of this race. That was a yellow flag. It has now brought out the virtual safety car as we get some more pit stops. And it's Lewis Hamilton straight in, has to slam on the brakes to get down to the pit limiter, locks up the tyres in doing so, and he's followed by the McLaren of Lando Norris.
It's a clean pit stop for the Merc, and this is great for them because the leading cars, the top 3, passed the pit lane when the virtual safety car came out. And if you make a pit stop under the virtual safety car, you save a bunch of time. So Hamilton and Norris were both able to dive in, as has pretty much everyone behind them, all the way down to the midfield runners. And the top 5 cars, it looks like, have missed out.
What it's done for Mercedes, though, Jack, is it's put Fernando Alonso on the hard tyre ahead of them already. And he was probably going to run long on that tyre. He now doesn't have to worry about trying to pass them on the track potentially. He might just be able to hold on that hard tyre, do a one-stop and stay ahead of Hamilton.
Yeah, this has worked out rather nicely for the Spaniard, who is now up into 4th place. He started on the hard compound tyre in that Aston Martin and has gained a few places while others have come into the pits. But what do Ferrari do with a problem like Leclerc and Sainz? Very close on track. Sainz is desperate to get through. He'll have to bide some time while we're under virtual safety car conditions. But Sainz is known for doing a bit of negotiating on the radio, and we might be seeing that now. He is told to box. But is Leclerc also coming in? Yes, he is. So Ferrari are going to double stack here. So I imagine Sainz is going to try and drop back a little bit to allow for a gap, but it's still fairly tight as Sainz then screams onto the brakes and into the pit lane. First of all, it's Leclerc, all four wheels off.
Slightly slow on the front left, and they're holding him. What's wrong? I don't know what was wrong there, but they lost 2 seconds, and Sainz, of course, has the knock-on effect of that. His pit stop doesn't look too bad so far, and again, they're holding this the front left. Will they finish with that tyre?
Slow pit stops for both the Ferraris as Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin comes in as well, so he didn't want to stay on those hards. He goes on to the medium compounder tyres. A really quick stop from Aston Martin, 2.7 seconds. His teammate comes in as well. So the two Ferraris double stacking, both incurring slow stops though. Meanwhile, Verstappen has stayed out ahead, now has over 19 seconds the gap in the lead as the midfield battle heats up nicely. We've got an Alfa Romeo, an Alpine and an Haas all fighting on the uphill to turn 3, and that is Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, who has a bit of damage to his front right wing end plate. He's in front though of the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, the only remaining Haas. They go side by side. Kevin Magnussen has DRS and gets the move done going into turn 4 round the outside and shifts his Haas over to make that move stick, and the Alpine of Pierre Gasly follows him through. So that's Magnussen up into 9th, Gasly in 10th, Bottas with damage on his front wing down to 11th.
We've got battles all over the track with that virtual safety car ending. Something I've noticed, we're now starting to get a lot more track limits violations coming through. We've just had one, bizarrely. Here's Sainz.
Guys, come on, why we don't stay out? Come on.
We'll get to that in a second, but bizarrely, we've just had a track limit violation for Hülkenberg, who, of course, has been out of this race for the best part of 5 minutes now. It's odd. And Hamilton is now under investigation by the stewards for track limits.
And that has come with a penalty, a 5-second time penalty for car 44, Lewis Hamilton, for exceeding track limits. So, Lando Norris and McLaren's complaining, paying off there. Hamilton is currently in 4th, having come into the pits and changed onto the hard compounder tyre under the virtual safety car. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz is doing battle with Lando Norris, the Ferrari in front of the McLaren.
So Sainz was complaining earlier on that radio message of why didn't we stay out? Why didn't we split the strategy, do something different to Leclerc? The argument would be that the number of seconds that you save under the virtual safety car by pitting, rather than at green flag conditions when the cars are at full speed, it just makes sense to do it and to take that time then.
Meanwhile, what we've seen now on strategy, not to depress everybody, but Ferrari have locked in a 2-stop because they've put the medium tyre on again, so they have to change to the hard tyre later in the race. We're seeing a replay of George Russell. Who's it he's passing, Harry?
Bottas.
Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Alonso's gone on to the medium tyre, but he's not going to run that to the end of the race, so he's almost certainly on a 2-stop as well. Hamilton's pretty much out of the reckoning with his 5-second penalty on the hard, but he's only done 15 laps on the medium, so it looks like everyone's going to have a 2-stop except for Verstappen.
We're just seeing a couple of replays as well from the various pit stops. I think an unsafe release might be coming to Alpine's door, with Ocon being released into the path of the Williams of Logan Sargent. Okay, lap 18, Verstappen leads Leclerc, Perez, Hamilton, Sainz the top 5, Norris, Alonso, Tsunoda, Gasly and Russell the top 10, but pit stops are still playing out at the moment. Time penalty coming through for Yuki Tsunoda for the exact same reason Lewis Hamilton has got one as well, for exceeding track limits. The midfield battle squabble continues to rage on. Valtteri Bottas's front wing, though, is absolutely, the front wing end plate is wobbling like mad.
Yes, front wing damage, Bottas. It's going to fall off.
Thank you, Esteban Ocon, for confirming that. And Ocon is right behind Alex Albon right now for 12th place currently, with Magnussen just in front of them too. So nice battles raging hard here in Austria. Lap 19 of the Austrian Grand Prix over at Lords for the second Ashes test. England now only need 93 more to win. You can hear all of that in full over on 5 Sports Extra. We'll be providing updates as often as we can throughout the rest of this Grand Prix coverage here on BBC Radio 5 Live. This is the sound of Carlos Sainz down through the gears into the right-hand braking zone in his Ferrari of turn 4, making his way through on Lewis Hamilton. Sainz up into 4th now in front of Hamilton. Norris 6th, Alonso 7th, Gasly 8th, Tsunoda 9th, Russell in 10th, and then just behind them, Kevin Magnussen and Alex Albon. And you know what? Let's talk Esteban Ocon and Lance Stroll as well. They're right there, all in this battle over 11th spot right now. Magnussen at the head of the queue.
Yeah, it's a big gaggle of cars. They can't seem to separate themselves out and get into a nice, clean, rhythmic running. It's just battles and pace difference between cars all over the place. And we're going to jump on board with Carlos Sainz. And it's a long move back from about 50 metres or something on the brakes into turn 3. And he gets it done. Hamilton is able to come back at him on the exit by getting a cleaner exit. And just so close. You could put a paper sheet between the wheels of the two cars as they battle towards turn 4.
They can just brake so much later than me.
Yeah, so Hamilton, I'm not sure if he was trying to insinuate that that was slightly unfair. And we have Sainz going around the outside of Perez now for P3. And he gets the move done. That was confident driving.
Yeah, that is a crucial move as well for Carlos Sainz, who gets himself up in front of the Red Bull, doesn't have to get stuck behind what is technically a faster car right now. So Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, the top 4 right now, but Perez hasn't come into the pits. The midfield battle, I know we're going on about it, but it really is heating up. Through turn 4 we go. We've got 4, nearly 5 cars involved in this. This is the sound on board the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, who has just lost a couple of positions to Albon in the Williams and Ocon in the Alpine, who both go through. So now it's Albon up into 11th, Ocon in 12th, Magnussen 13th, Stroll in 14th. Let's head over back to Lords then with Ellie Oldroyd.
And England just eating into that lead, 278 for 6, 93 more needed to win, with Stokes on 134, Stuart Broad on 10, Stephen Finn is alongside me, and Finney, it's as much about the importance of Broad and the other partners for Ben Stokes from now on.
Yeah, they just have to support him. Ben Stokes taking 5 balls and over and giving his partner at the other end 1, so he's trying to hit a boundary off the first 5 and then take a single, so he stays on a strike. Stuart Broad struck with a ferocious delivery from Mitchell Stark, the last ball of the previous over, but he's hanging in there, and Ben Stokes is trying to smash everything to the boundary. It's fascinating stuff.
The bowling big guns are back on again with Stark and Cummins. Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. 278 for 6, the crowd is gripped here at Lords, 93 more needed to win.
We're also gripped in the commentary box, we can't lie, we've got it on the TV here too, and we're listening to the coverage, but we have the 5 Live Austrian Grand Prix that is currently on lap 22 of 71. Verstappen leads by almost 15 seconds from Charles Leclerc, and Carlos Sainz, the 2 Ferraris, rounding out the podium positions for now. Perez 4th, Hamilton the top 5, Norris, Alonso, Gasly, Russell, Albon the top 10, Ocon, Tsunoda, Stroll, Magnussen, Piastri the top 15, Bottas, Sargent, Zhou, Nick de Vries the 19th and last of the drivers remaining in this race after Nico Hülkenberg conked out in his Haas and is out of the race. Hamilton up in 5th is right onto the back of Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, who started down in 15th. He's on the medium compounder tyre, but he hasn't come into the pits whilst others have and made use of the virtual safety car. Little lock-up coming into turn 4 from Lewis Hamilton as he tried to find a way around Perez, had to think better of it and slot back behind. Perez placing that Red Bull in all the defensive places to try and keep this position. Meanwhile ahead, here's Sainz.
Okay, third strike and black and white flag. Be careful. 9 and 10. And the next one will be 5 seconds penalty.
And that is referring to track limits violations, and we've seen 5 seconds penalties already handed out to Lewis Hamilton and Yuki Tsunoda.
It's such a hard call, because when you get that notification that this is your last chance, you cannot do it again, it puts such a brake on what you are willing, the risks that you're willing to take with your car, and you want to be able to play with that line, especially on the exit of turn 10, turn 1, where the exit is so important for overtaking at the circuit.
Meanwhile, what's interesting about the fight at the front, well, I call it a fight, Verstappen's obviously out on his own, but between the 2 Ferrari drivers, since they've come out from the pits after that stop under the virtual safety car, Leclerc's actually lapping quite considerably faster than Sainz. Here's some Hamilton radio.
Perez completely off turn 10. Has he got a penalty yet?
So nothing for Perez at the moment.
So, yeah, as I was saying, Leclerc's been pulling away from Sainz about half a second a lap, and he's been closing in on Verstappen. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that he's going to threaten Verstappen, but it's interesting that all that stuff on the radio from Sainz in the first stint, was Leclerc just protecting his tyres?
Quite possibly. We're just seeing a few replays in that midfield fight. This is the sound of Kevin Magnussen and the Haas, who gets a bit of a whack from Oscar Piastri coming through turn 3, the uphill right-hander, and just ahead of them, it was actually Magnussen half trying to avoid the back end of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin, who was trying to get through on the AlphaTauri of Yuki Tsunoda, who was being quite aggressive with his turn-in, and it all concertinaed up, but it was rather a mighty whack from Piastri, who I think has dropped right to the back of the field. Here's Hamilton.
This guy's been off every single time. Turn 10 again.
Copy.
So the frustration building there for Hamilton. He's getting stuck behind this car and losing the benefit of his newer tyres, and the more time that he spends behind the dirty air of Perez, the less of an advantage he's going to have with those tyres. So he kind of needs to get the job done quickly, but he's just not showing any signs of it.
Into the pits, Max Verstappen for his first pit stop. It is cool, calm and collected, and it's 2.3 seconds from the Red Bull team to get him out well in front he should come out, actually. Where will he come out? Because Leclerc has gone through. Verstappen now is out of the pit lane, but it's a little bit of a shorter run through turn 1. Sainz, it's going to be close, but Sainz is just going to get him. He'll carry more momentum. So Verstappen comes out behind the Ferrari, but well in front of his teammates. He should make quick work of this on the Ferrari, but it's how difficult does Carlos Sainz want to be here?
I mean, this is their chance. They've got track position now thanks to that stop under the virtual safety car, but Max has the advantage of brand new hard tyres, and if he's able to make this pass, then they're going to Ferrari have to make another pit stop anyway, but they have to try and hold him up as much as possible if they have any chance later on.
Not just brand new tyres, but also the Red Bull's DRS is much more effective than everybody else's. They gain more speed on the straight by using the DRS, so most teams are finding themselves helpless against a Red Bull behind them this season.
That was the voice of the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson. Also in the commentary box is the former Williams driver, Jack Aitken, in his lap 25 of the Austrian Grand Prix. Leclerc leads Sainz, leads Verstappen in third. Perez was fourth, but he's just been called into the pits for his first pit stop. That promotes Hamilton up a place. Then it'll be Norris, Alonso, Gasly, Russell, Albon currently the top 10. Ocon, Stroll, Sargent, Magnussen, Zhou the top 15. De Vries, Tsunoda, Piastri and Bottas, the 19 remaining drivers in this race. We have lost Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas after the power unit failed on him. Meanwhile, the battle goes on for second place on the road right now. Max Verstappen, who's come into the pits after a healthy lead, came out behind both Ferraris. He was on the hard compounder tyre, but with DRS, he has managed to get through on the first Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, who did put up a little bit of a defence there, but I think the writing was on the wall and it was coming. And as they power out of the right-hander of turn 4, Verstappen is up to second now with 6.4 seconds to close in on Charles Leclerc.
Meanwhile, Ocon has had a 5-second penalty given to him for his unsafe release in pit lane against Logan Sargent, and we now see him fighting against Perez, who has also just had a pit stop like Verstappen 1 lap later, but instead of going on to a new set of hards, he's taken on a set of mediums.
Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, right up behind Sergio Perez, who is in a bit of a sandwich here with Alex Albon in front of him as they make their way through the left-hander of 7. The right-hand kink then fastly approaches of 8, and before you know it, you're into the double right-handers that close the lap here in Styria for the Red Bull Ring. And Perez then up into the top 10, having started down in 15th, so he needs to try and make as many on-track passes as he can now to get himself some more valuable points and try and do anything that he can to close the gap to his teammate Max Verstappen at the top of the standings, which currently coming into this race stood at 70 points the gap. So it's an awful lot of work to do for Sergio Perez, who has had a bit of a bad stint of form over the last few races, but his DRS rear wing flap flies open on the uphill approach to turn 3 down the inside of the Williams of Alex Albon, and he makes light work of the Thai driver. Through goes Perez up into 9th.
Yeah, it was quite a simple move for him in the end. We jump on board with Lando Norris, who's still in 5th place, looking at the back of Hamilton, and he's holding his position quite nicely there and just sitting off the back, not getting too close to Mercedes. It looks like he's trying to not get sucked in too much by that dirty air. One of the issues I think that teams and drivers are having with track limits at the moment is the fact that they're so delayed, because we're looking at these notifications coming off the board and they're referring to laps that are happening 10, 12 minutes ago. And usually as a driver, you want immediate feedback from your engineer saying, that last lap, that was track limits, don't do that again. And you're like, right, I can recalibrate. As it is, though, when they're saying, 10 minutes ago in turn 10, you remember that was too far. You have to, stay a bit further inside. And, of course, these drivers don't know what's happening there.
Norris is closing on the back of Hamilton before we see how this pans out, I think he's going to go for the move down the outside. Norris through on the Mercedes. The McLaren gets the 7-time champion, and we can head back to Lords with Ellie Oldroyd.
England 292 for 6, 79 more needed to win. Ben Stokes 148 not out. Stuart Broad is on 10. Stokes has just hit his 9th 6, 2 in succession from Mitchell Stark, breaking the record for the number of 6s in an Ashes innings, which of course was his from Headingley 4 years ago. Could it happen, Stephen Finn?
I really don't want to put a curse on him, but it's looking imperious at the moment from Ben Stokes. There's all sorts of meetings out there going on between the Australian bowlers and senior players, but they're sticking with this plan. Every single man is on the boundary for Ben Stokes, and they're just praying and hoping that he mishits one into the hands of one of those men waiting out there on the boundary. But at the moment, the second he tries to hit it for 6, it's going miles and miles over their head. It really is riveting. 79 still needed to win.
Keeps finding the stands rather than the fielders so far. 292 for 6, 79 more needed.
Just 79 more needed then over at Lords, and we're on lap 29 of 71 here at the Austrian Grand Prix. Guiding you through all the coverage is myself, Harry Benjamin, the former Williams driver, Jack Aitken, and the BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson.
It's worth saying here, Lando Norris is having a terrific race in the McLaren. Remember, it's been upgraded for this weekend. We didn't know how it was going to perform. It did really well in qualifying, and McLaren's weakness this year has been tyre degradation in races, but Norris has just passed Hamilton. He's running in a strong 4th place. Meanwhile, the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso is 6th. Doesn't really seem to have much pace. So for McLaren, okay, it might be Austria-specific. It's a track where Norris has traditionally been very strong, and McLaren too, but it's really good signs for them as they introduce these new parts on the car.
Yeah, I think they'll be really happy with what Norris is able to show right now. He's 6 seconds behind Sainz at the moment, who does have a 5-second time penalty. The closest battles on track at the moment are Perez on the back of George Russell for 8th and 9th position. Also just behind them, Albon in the Williams is coming under a lot of pressure from the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, just half a second through. But here is the sound of Sergio Perez down the inside into turn 3 on the Mercedes of George Russell. A little bit of a bump as they clear out the inside apex, but then down the next straight into the approach of turn 4. Russell will have DRS now. He's behind, but he doesn't have the speed. He's not close enough, and Perez picks off another car in front to get through into 8th spot. Russell down to 9th.
Yeah, again, Russell choosing not to fight that one too hard. He doesn't want to lose too much time holding up a car that is so much faster than him. On board now, Carlos Sainz. We're getting a replay. What are we going to see? And it's just a replay of him just ever so slightly dipping over the white line on the exit of turn 9. That's been a problem area, along with turn 9 this weekend for the drivers. It's very hard for them in such a high-speed corner to judge the millimetre perfection that they usually set their standards to.
Lap 31 of 71, Leclerc leads with a 2.8 second gap over Verstappen, who is quickly honing in on him. Sainz is 3rd, Norris 4th, Hamilton the top 5, Alonso, Gasly, Perez, Russell, Albon the top 10 and last of the point scorers. Ocon is 11th in front of Stroll, Sargent, Zhou, Magnussen the top 15, De Vries, Tsunoda, Bottas and Piastri, the 19 drivers still in this race, with Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas retiring.
So now we're going to see in the next few laps this battle between Leclerc and Verstappen, and as I mentioned before with Sainz, it's going to be the same thing that applies. If they want any hope of taking the fight to Verstappen later in this race when Leclerc is the radio for Norris.
I know you'll hate me, but we must be within track limits every lap. There's so much going on here.
And the poor engineers trying to keep up just like we are with the timing screens. I can tell you it's like...
Albon is the latest to get a black and white flag.
As we're talking about it, more are coming in all the time. and the engineers are in an impossible situation when they have that much of a delay between the actual offence and the notification of the offence. So he's just begging Norris, please make my job easy, don't get any more offences. But going back to the Ferraris, they have this one more pit stop to make to the more favourable race tyre, you would say, but if they want to use that tyre life to their advantage later, and here's Leclerc.
At the moment, degradation is higher than expected. What do you think about 3 stops?
I think the answer was pretty clear-cut on that. No. The degradation on the Ferraris is not great anyway, and then when you're told it's higher than expected, that's bad news.
You could almost hear the shake of the head with that reply, couldn't you, from Leclerc? I mean, he was not impressed with that suggestion, but if the tyre degradation is higher than expected, this is playing into the hands of their strategy versus the one stop of the Red Bulls. So when Verstappen gets to the back of Leclerc in, say, a lap or two's time, looking at the recent laps, he's going to have to get the elbows out, try and hold them up as much as possible, stick him in the dirty air in the high-speed sections of this track and get him to use those hard tyres and degrade them.
Lando Norris speeds out of turn 1 in 4th place, and he's still got Lewis Hamilton for company, who is just within a second, which means he does get the advantage of opening the rear wing flap to give himself a bit of a boost for DRS, and actually Norris runs a little bit deep coming into turn 3, which allows Hamilton to close up into the apex, but then Norris is able to get onto the power a bit earlier. He's not able to quite shake off Hamilton here. Norris just being told on his radio to make sure he does stay within the track limits. We are seeing so many drivers exceeding the limits of this track, putting all 4 wheels across the white line, and if you do that after 3 times you get a black and white flag, and then you may well get a 5-second time penalty if you do it again, which many have got. But if anyone knows how to overcome a 5-second time penalty from the car in front, it's actually Lando Norris. That's how he achieved his podium here.
So we're heading into lap 34, and Max Verstappen has just about caught Charles Leclerc on the point of Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton, Harry. The reason that Hamilton's able to keep with Norris is that the DRS is quite powerful around a lap at Austria, and it's worth about 7/10 of a second. So you can actually be, ironically, you can be slower generally if you were running in clear air, but you're able to stay with another driver because of the DRS. Here's Verstappen challenging Leclerc.
Up through 7th gear. Will we get to 8th? Yes, we will. This is the sound of Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, who into turn 4 takes the wider line, claps the inside curb, and has the Ferrari of Leclerc in his vision of sight. It is only a matter of time until Verstappen makes his way past Leclerc. It's just when will he do it? They come through the left-hander of 7, the fast right-hand kink of 8, which is taken pretty much flat in these Formula 1 cars. Leclerc hanging on for the time being, just half a second between these two, though. Verstappen with the fastest lap as they make their way around the final corner. 10 turns here in Austria at the Red Bull Ring, an incredibly undulating track surrounded by the Styrian Mountains. The grandstands are packed with a sea of orange, with the Dutch fans making the journey to support Max Verstappen, who is the sound you can hear right now. DRS open into the approach of 3. He moves to the inside of the Ferrari of Leclerc. Late on the brakes for Max Verstappen. Gets the move done on Leclerc, who doesn't put up too much of a fight. And Verstappen is able to now put his foot to the floor and fly away from Leclerc in the run down to turn 4.
Leclerc showing his nose into turn 4 as if he's trying to intimidate Max. I don't think that's going to do much, but I'm surprised that he didn't put up a bit more of a fight there. He left the door open into turn 3 and didn't seem to want to fight it. He was very late on the brakes on the outside to try and hold himself in that position, but then got a little bit of rear locking and then a front lock as the rear got out of shape. We're just seeing a replay of it now. Max was almost expecting him to defend and was shaping up to go to the outside of turn 3. And then when he saw the door was wide open, he happily took it.
Well, a new race leader then, or the man who has retaken the race lead, Max Verstappen, gets up into first place. His teammate continues to make moves as well. Further back, having started in 15th, Sergio Perez has just overtaken the Alpine of Pierre Gasly up into 7th. Here's Kevin Magnussen.
The Prix just completely pushed me off again. What the...
Now that was Kevin Magnussen being forced off into the gravel by the AlphaTauri.
Yeah, and I have to agree with Magnussen. It's always ambitious to go around the outside, but he was fully alongside. His front wheel was next to the front wheel of De Vries, and usually in that scenario, you have to leave a space, and De Vries just drove him off the road. So that, I wouldn't be surprised if that led to a penalty.
Now, those two had a bit of a coming together as well in Montreal, and indeed it ended up in contact, and both of them sort of sidling off through turn 3, I think it was, in the runoff area. But Magnussen actually saying, well, who am I to talk about hard-fought fighting on track? Because we know the Dane does love to get his elbows out. That's what we love about him. But on that occasion, I think Nick De Vries was pushing his luck a little bit there. But Magnussen now down in 19th and all the way at the back of the pack. If you're keeping a track of who's got a 5-second time penalty and who hasn't, well, you can add Alex Albon to your list. He's currently in 10th, only 6/10 in front of Esteban Ocon at the moment, but he has just been hit with a time penalty for exceeding track limits. And as I say that, Lance Stroll, not a penalty just yet, but a black and white flag for track limits. If he does it again, there will be another penalty handed out.
Yeah, it's an impossible situation. I'm still watching these notifications come through a good 10 minutes after the offence. And I want to stress that's really not normal. Usually in F1 and indeed any junior single-seater series, you're used to the notification coming within a lap or so of the offence. And that, like I say, it allows the driver to get a feedback, because you're always going to push it. Every advantage that you can take, even if the rules say to the white line, maybe they're being lenient that weekend and they let you go a little bit over, use the red and white curb, and that's what these drivers are used to. That's why they're making so many offences out there. They're waiting for that first notification to come in to say, right, that's the limit, that's where I'm going to set my limit to and behave as such going forward. But when it's 10 or 15 minutes after the fact, you may have already done your 3 offences by that point.
Whereas Lance Stroll makes his way into the pits and then out again for a tyre change. We can see if Ben Stokes and England are still on the limit. Ellie Oldroyd at Lords.
Ben Stokes is on 149 with Stuart Broad on 11. 294 for 6 is the England score. 77 more needed to win. Pat Cummins is having a conversation with his management team of Smith and Labuschagne. Steve Smith, I wonder... Stephen Finn? You're not Steve Smith, Stephen Finn. I wonder how much the Australians have memories of Headingley 2019 in their heads.
Well, it's all looking a bit ragged out there at the moment for Australia. Steve Smith, such a good fielder, dropped a catch earlier in the piece just after lunch, and Ben Stokes has capitalised on that. But certainly out there, those people who experienced Headingley in 2019 will be evoking memories of that, especially with the way Ben Stokes is playing.
He's playing calmly when he needs to, and he's hitting the bad balls when he can. 149 not out, the England captain. 294 for 6, 77 more needed to win.
And don't you worry, we'll be keeping you up to date with all the very latest action from the cricket, the TMS team over on 5 Sports Extra, and live updates continued here on BBC Radio 5 Live. In between live coverage of the Austrian Grand Prix, lap 39 of 71. Max Verstappen leads by 4.5 seconds from Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz in the 2 Ferraris. Norris and Hamilton round out the top 5. Then it's Alonso, Perez, Gasly, Russell, Albon the top 10. Ocon, Sargent, Zhou, Stroll, Tsunoda the top 15. Bottas, Piastri, Nick De Vries in 18th has just come into the pits in his AlphaTauri. Kevin Magnussen has just been forced off the road, is down in 19th. Nico Hülkenberg in the other Haas is the only driver out of this race.
Well, they've been reunited as De Vries makes a pit stop to match Magnussen, and they're within a tenth of each other again on circuit, so that'll be an interesting battle. But
we're thinking about who's closest on track, and it is those two now, isn't it?
Typical, isn't it? And he has been given a penalty now for that incident with Magnussen at turn 6, so a 5-second penalty for De Vries for forcing Magnussen off the track.
Yeah, so you can add that to your 5-second bingo card.
No one else got penalties yet. Lewis, they're all going to get penalties in front of you, all of them, so keep going.
That's Toto Wolff there, getting involved and replying to Lewis Hamilton on the radio. They are all going to get 5-second time penalties. De Vries' one was for the incident. Everybody else at the moment, it's for track limits.
I'm not sure about that. I don't think they will all. Sainz already has one. Who else has got one?
Leclerc doesn't. Verstappen obviously doesn't.
Norris doesn't. So
Norris is being very careful, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So Toto might be wrong about that.
Oh, braver words than I against Toto Wolff, but perhaps just some encouraging chat there from the team principal of Mercedes to keep Lewis Hamilton in it to the very end. He's currently in 5th and over a second now back from Lando Norris, and 2 seconds in front of a chasing Fernando Alonso, who is slowly catching him in that Aston Martin, with Perez, who is recovering from 15th on the grid, up to 7th now.
Yeah, so it looks like people have entered the middle part of this race where they're just trying to take care of tyres and settling in for the long haul at the halfway stage. Seeing a replay now of what got De Vries that penalty. Oh no, so this is another attempt at the same corner, it looks like, because he actually managed to stay on the track this time, but he didn't get the move done.
Yeah, I think that one was through the right hand of turn 4, and then the original incident was the next corner through 6, yes, where the gravel is to your right, and De Vries is on the inside and just forced Magnussen into the gravel, well and truly taking a beating in that Haas. And for lap 41 of 71, Lando Norris rounds the final corner, currently in 4th. Ben Stokes going well on the cricket, now just needing 75 more to win, so we will keep you updated on that. Stokes is on 151 right now, so the action really heating up both here in Austria and at Lords. You can hear it all in full with the TMS team over on 5 Sports Extra, with continued updates here on BBC Radio 5 Live, where we plough on with live coverage of the Austrian Grand Prix, and everybody is trying to avoid now for the remainder of this race getting a track limits penalty. Drivers yet to serve their 5-second time penalties are Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, Alex Albon and Nick De Vries. They can take it in a pit stop, which means they cannot touch the car or interfere it for the first 5 seconds they come in, and then they can get on with their pit stop, which I wonder, as Esteban Ocon just experienced, and he screeches out of the pit lane.
Funnily enough, it can actually lead to more mistakes. You'd think the mechanics having a 5-second penalty where they have to sit and wait for the car and sort of poised, ready to gun the wheels off, that they would maybe go a bit faster. But it's not the case. It breaks the rhythm of the mechanics. They're used to having the car come in and work immediately.
Meanwhile, in the Ferrari psychodrama, having had Sainz challenging Leclerc in the first stint, asking to be let by, and then Leclerc pulling away at the start of the second stint, we've now got Sainz closing back in on Leclerc. He's doing about 3/10 a lap, and we've got Perez challenging Alonso while Alonso closes in on Hamilton.
Yeah, Perez with DRS down the inside into the uphill approach of turn 3, gets the move done on Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. Esteban Ocon in the pits did serve that 5-second time penalty. George Russell is next to get out of the pits as he screeches out of his pit box outside the Mercedes garage. A 2.8-second stop for the British racer. So the next and final, we believe, pit stops currently undergoing. Here is Sainz in 3rd.
Let's extend to see if we catch a safety car. Copy.
I think that's their best hope at the moment, really, for Carlos. So it's not a bad call. And bingo cards, Pierre Gasly, 5-second time penalty for track limits as Hamilton dives into the pit lane now.
I'm going to need a new piece of paper to keep all of these track penalties on. Hamilton is in the pits as Gasly gets a 5-second time penalty. Piastri is also in the pits further back. So everybody in the top 10 getting a promotion at the moment, but Hamilton then in the pits, so through go Perez and Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton, no work going on as he pulls into the box. They are serving that 5-second time penalty, and the rule is you cannot have any kind of contact with that car for 5 seconds. Then you can get to work with your pit stop, and they make tidy work of it, Mercedes. 8.9 seconds with that 5-second time penalty as he gets off the pit limiter and rejoins this race.
Yeah, effectively then a 3.9-second pit stop, which with those penalties is actually not that bad. Like I say, they're quite tricky to get right, and you absolutely want to leave a little bit of margin for that 5-second penalty, because if it's 4.9, you're going to have to come in and do it again.
Yeah, I think Ocon, who did it, was over 11 seconds in the end, so it was a bit slower on the Alpine car. This is how it stands then at the moment. Verstappen leads by over 10 seconds to Leclerc and Sainz. Perez in 4th, Alonso rounds out the top 5. Gasly, Norris, Hamilton, Sargent up into 9th in the Williams, and make that 10th as Russell gets him. Russell into 9th, Sargent 10th, Stroll 11th, Albon 12th, Tsunoda, Ocon, Zhou the top 15, De Vries, Magnussen, Bottas and Oscar Piastri, the 19 drivers that remain in this race, with Nico Hülkenberg down and out with a retirement, as we are just listening to the sounds of George Russell make his way past Logan Sargent, who I believe we are still owed a pit stop from, or is he going to try and make it to the end? But he's currently down in 10th spot, so on the fringes, and Stroll catching him at a rate of knots in the Aston Martin, 7/10 of a second between the Canadian and the American.
Lando Norris now coming up behind Pierre Gasly for 6th into turn 3, shapes him up with the DRS and takes him quite comfortably before the braking zone, gets it all slowed down. That's nice and tidy. So it's, yeah, an easy move in. He has some nice clean air to work with now, about, well, 15 seconds to Alonso ahead of him before he's going to hit any more battles.
Logan Sargent did owe us a pit stop, he's in, so through goes Stroll, through goes Albon. Tsunoda also coming into the pits as well in his Alpha Tauri. Getting a little bit feisty though between Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo and Fernando Alonso. Now Bottas is down in 18th, Alonso is up in 5th spot here, although he's just come into the pits, but this was just before that, so he was having quite the ding-dong with Bottas, which carried on through turns 3, down the main straight, into 4. Bottas wasn't willing to give over that one too easily.
No, he wanted to unlap himself. He clearly had probably just made a pit stop and had better pace than Alonso, who has now just come in for a new set of tyres. Sainz also now being told to box this lap, so they're clearly not going to try and wait for that safety car. Their pace has dropped off a bit. Both of the Ferraris struggling in the last laps to match the pace of Verstappen. When I say match, even get close to it. They were losing about a second a lap at that point, so really that was a necessary call.
The Alpine of Gasly as well, you just heard in the background there, screeching out from his pit box, has changed onto the medium compounder tyre, and also, I believe, has served his 5-second time penalty, so I've crossed that one off the list, as slowing right down to the pit lane speed limit. Carlos Sainz, the Ferrari, enters stage left and into the pit box. And they will not work on that car for 5 seconds, like many others in this race being victims of a penalty for exceeding track limits. Now they get to work. All the engineers and mechanics getting those wheels changed in a split of a second, and Sainz makes his way down towards the end of the pit lane, and out he goes. Norris comes speeding through turn 1 on track in the McLaren. He will carry more speed, and he will get Carlos Sainz as they both come out into the rundown to turns 2 and 3. Norris ahead of Sainz. Norris 4th, Sainz 5th.
These two great friends off the track from their time together at McLaren, but Sainz is going to be wanting to get past the McLaren very, very quickly, because it's just going to hold him up in his pursuit of a podium spot. And he will have Perez to contend with, especially with that 5-second penalty. And he's got DRS. Norris defends into turn 4. He goes all the way around the outside Sainz, and he's just about managed to keep it on track. It's a brilliant move that to get past McLaren ASAP.
Lovely wheel-to-wheel action between Sainz in the Ferrari and Norris in the McLaren through turn forward on the exit. Norris really squeezed Sainz as far as he could, played very nicely, gave him more than a car's length of width, a car's width of room on the edge of the circuit, and Sainz gets through and up into 4th.
Child information, we are looking at a thread end of race. We need to try to extend this stint.
And that was Charles Leclerc's radio, and they are asking quite a lot of him, Jack, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you can see that the pace of that Ferrari is dropped off fairly considerably. Both the Red Bulls are in the 109, mid-109s, let's say, and he is in the mid-110s, so over a second off the pace compared to those around him. Carlos was in the same situation, hence why they've made that pit stop, but they're clearly going to try and split the strategy here and see if they can get a little bit of luck to help them.
This is the sound of Lando Norris as Leclerc is just told to pit. Poor timing, Jack. This is the sound of Norris, who was going up through the gears, still keeping tabs on Carlos Sainz and the Ferrari, who had just got ahead of him, still keeping within DRS range. This is Leclerc coming into the pits. No penalty to serve for the Monegasque racer, so it's a nice and tidy 2.5 second stop, and on he goes. Perez goes through into second. 25 seconds the gap between himself and and Max Verstappen, who leads this race.
They're not racing anybody, right? So they can't be trying to double guess anybody. So why on earth are they telling him 1 minute before they tell him to pit that he's going to stay out and extend his stint? I mean, you have to ask questions about Ferrari strategy, don't you?
Again?
It's been known to be said before. I mean, look, yeah. I don't know what to say. It is slightly bizarre. The only thing is we do sometimes get delayed radio messages, so that could have been from 5 or so minutes ago, and
that is a very fair point. But well, Leclerc in and out, comes out in third in front of his teammate. He's got an 8.5 or so gap over his teammate in third and fourth. Norris behind, just 6/10 in fifth. Alonso 6th, Hamilton 7th over his teammate. Russell in 8th, Stroll is 9th, Gasly is 10th. That is Albon, Ocon, Sargent, Zhou, De Vries the top 15. Magnussen, who is the latest to get a black and white flag for track limits. He's down in 16th though, in front of Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda and Oscar Piastri in 19th, with Nico Hülkenberg out of this race.
We now have the two Ferraris somewhat close again on track, and depending on pace, how Sainz manages to get these tyres up and running, if he closes in again, it's going to become a fight for the final podium spot possibly, and those questions that we had at the start of the race might start to surface again with, well, yeah, some silverware on the line.
Fastest lap as well, over the line for Lando Norris. This is the sound you can hear of the McLaren up into 8th gear through the slight left-hand kink, which is technically turn 2, before you're straight into the uphill right-hander at turn 3. And while he's trying to catch Carlos Sainz and retake that position, which he lost a few laps ago, Max Verstappen is told to box to come into the pits, and he trundles into his pit box, hits his marks. All 4 wheels are changed within the blink of an eye. He had over a 25-second gap before he came into the pits, with the rough pit loss time just being over 20 seconds, so he should come well out in front of his teammate Sergio Perez.
Yeah, it's a case of why not for them. Well, yeah, we'll take a fresh set of rubber. We're not going to lose the lead anyway, and even if we do, we'll probably get it back.
Well, he's got a little bit of traffic though to contend with. He just about gets in front of Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, and I think he's got an Alpine and a Williams fighting in front of him, so that could well be Ocon and Sargent down in 12th and 13th position.
Interestingly, Norris is really holding well onto the back of that Ferrari of Sainz. He's set the fastest lap of the race, a 108.7, using to good effect that DRS that Andrew was talking about earlier, and really gaining a lot of straight line speed whilst managing to stay behind in the corners. Just getting a replay of De Vries locking up in turn 3, fairly harmless.
So the big question now is who's going to finish on the podium. We know Verstappen's going to win the race unless something goes wrong with him, but you've got Perez with an 8-second lead over Leclerc. He's been told to pit now, and who's got an 8-second lead over Sainz. So can Perez catch Sainz? And if he can catch Sainz and pass him, can he then catch Leclerc as well?
Getting into the closing stages then of this Austrian Grand Prix, while we wait to see how it all plays out, we can head back to Lords, but we've got a quick drinks break. Ellie Aldridge.
Yes, during the drinks break, Ben Stokes has run up the steps to the pavilion. When he came out to bat, England were 45 for 4. They're now 299 for 6. They need 72 more to win. He's on 154. Broad is on 11. And Australia rotating their bowlers, Stephen Finn. But of course, they don't have Nathan Lyon to call on.
No, he's been a big loss today. Having the off-spinner at one end, especially with left-handers batting together, could have been a potent threat. But at the moment, Ben Stokes is thrashing Australia all over the place. Australia in their huddle there will be trying to recalibrate and work out how they're going to take these last 4 English wickets. But with 72 runs to win, England now feel as though they're well and truly in the ascendancy, and the Lord's crowd are behind them as well.
Time to rethink, regroup, and England will resume after the drinks break on 299 for 6, 72 away still.
Thank you very much, Ellie Oldroyd. 52 of 71. That is the lap count so far here for the Austrian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen leads by almost 14 seconds as he just sets the fastest lap from Leclerc and Sainz, the 2 Ferraris. Then it's Norris, who is keeping the Ferrari of Sainz well within his sights, and that McLaren in 4th. Perez is 5th. Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Stroll, Gasly the top 10. Albon, Ocon, Sargent, Zhou, De Vries the top 15. Magnussen, Bottas, Tsunoda, Piastri, the 19th and last of the drivers remaining in this race, with Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas, the only retirement so far after a engine issue. He pulled out with steam pouring out of the back end of that Haas. But only one retirement. Here's Hamilton.
Is there a reason why stewards haven't given those penalties yet?
Yeah, they're still dishing out warnings and penalties.
Lewis, the car is bad, we know. Please drive it.
Now, Toto Wolff did promise Lewis Hamilton that those ahead would receive penalties, and I think that is Hamilton wondering, well, where are they? And now Wolff perhaps having to backtrack a little bit and go, well, look, the car's not quite there. He is ahead of his teammate, though, by over 10 seconds, but he's 2.5 seconds back from Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, which is where their real fight is at the moment for second in the Constructors.
I'm still impressed with Norris. He's just sitting happily in the DRS of Sainz after seemingly losing the position pretty easily when Sainz came out of the pits. And dealing with that dirty air is no mean feat, but he's doing it. And they've still got a 2.5 second gap to Perez, who's just clocked the fastest lap of the race, ever so slightly faster than his teammate Verstappen in the lead. So he's going to be with them in the next few laps.
Well, we know how powerful as well this DRS is. Andrew was telling us, just, how many tenths was it, Andrew? Can you remind me that you gain on DRS?
7 tenths.
7 tenths of a second. So even if you are technically a slower car, you can still remain within half a second, 8 tenths of a second behind the driver in front. And a reminder, the DRS is the rear wing opens in the allotted zone if you are within a second of the car in front, which Norris is able to remain within, but he can't really break that half a second barrier. Sainz in third, Norris in fourth. Bit of traffic having to be negotiated. Here is Sainz.
You know, when Lando loses DRS, I might keep him for second.
Copy.
Depends on check of base. I need to know check of base and I decide what to do with Lando.
Let me know the first time lap.
So that's a very interesting strategy from Sainz. He's effectively asking for his engineer to keep him updated so that he can use Norris as a rear gunner and just give him DRS, give him that straight line boost so that it's that much harder for Perez to overtake him. It's pretty smart driving there.
Well, Sergio Perez has got a bit of traffic in the form of the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri, who is down in 19th at the moment after getting a bit of damage running into the back of the Haas of Kevin Magnussen. So Perez, though, now coming into viewpoint of the battle for third between Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. Norris still able to maintain the gap under a second to Sainz and make use of that DRS, but now traffic really is having to come into play here. It's a really short lap here, and we are on lap 54 of 71, so we are going to see lapped runners with a shorter amount of ground to cover. Verstappen leads now the gap over 16 seconds to Leclerc. Sainz third, Norris fourth, Perez fifth, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Stroll, Gasly the top 10, Albon, Ocon, Sargent, Zhou, De Vries the top 15, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda and Oscar Piastri the 19th and last of the drivers currently remain in this race, with Nico Hülkenberg still out. If you are looking for live cricket and the Ashes second test updates, you can hear it all in full on the 5 Sports Extra. It's 299 for 6 at the moment, with England needing 72 more to win. We're also going to be live at Wimbledon later on. Looking forward to a mega few weeks of tennis action at SW19. All the coverage across BBC Radio 5 Live.
There's to stay on the track limits. Can't afford a penalty here. There's entry turn 10, exit turn 10. Main concerns for track limits.
Okay, that was Sergio Perez's radio, being told and warned about the track limits. They cannot afford it. Alonso is 9.3 seconds behind, as this is the sound of his teammate coming in for a pit stop from 11th. But Perez has been closing on Norris the last couple of laps in that battle for fourth. Now just over a second the gap. So Perez can't afford to have this 5 seconds hanging over him if he does get it, which the team are slightly worried he did. A reminder, if we cast our minds back to Friday qualifying, where everybody was getting a track limits violation and a lap time deleted, Sergio Perez, the big casualty of that, and had to start this Grand Prix from 15th place.
So Sainz and Norris still stuck together and in the DRS, but Perez has now finally got onto the back of Norris for that DRS, and he cracks it open on the run up to turn 3. They're all pretty spaced out, so there won't be a move here. and Sainz is even getting a little bit of a tow from some lap traffic ahead of him, but this is now going to be the fight for the final place on the podium, and Norris goes wide into turn 3, just scrabbling for grip. He's now got Perez less than a car length behind him.
Perez is closing up through the gears into the downhill run of turn 4, down the inside. The lap runner of the Alfa Romeo gets out the way nicely, and Perez gets through on Lando Norris up into 4th for the Mexican Red Bull driver with 15 laps to go. Verstappen leads Leclerc, Sainz is 3rd, and the next target for Sergio Perez, who will be desperately trying to get onto the podium to make up for his poor qualifying efforts, as Norris is displaced now down to 5th.
That is not what Carlos Sainz wanted to see behind him. He was really hoping that he'd have an easy ride in the last part of this race with the McLaren behind him. Relatively easy, no offence, Lando. Sergio Perez in that charging Red Bull is going to be a much more difficult prospect, and he is already right on the back of Sainz, less than a half second behind as they go through turn 1. He will have DRS now and shaping him up, possibly not into turn 3, but into turn 4.
This is the sound of Carlos Sainz, who has got a mirror full of Red Bull. Sergio Perez in turn 3 looks to the left, looks to the right, not close enough, but he'll get DRS in the run down to turn 4. The overcast skies here amongst the Styrian Mountains, with the fans absolutely packed to the rafters in the grandstands, witnessing some great racing and battling in this mid-pack. Perez, though, not close enough to try and find a way through in turn 4, has to bide his time. Next main overtaking opportunity for Sergio will be coming onto the main straight, lining it up into turn 1, and then the next DRS zone in the run down to 2 and 3.
There's a big wiggle for Carlos Sainz going through turn 7 there. He managed to keep it all more or less together. Here's Perez on the radio.
Sainz moving on the braking.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a move from Sainz to maximise the track after defending, coming back to the outside, but it wasn't too disturbing, let's say. I think that will not be picked up by the stewards.
As a driver, are you encouraged by somebody to go, if you are in a battle, pinpoint everything you can in the car in front of you, especially if you're in as tight a battle as this between Sainz and Perez, who really closed up into turn 3, got the better run out of it. They both have DRS though, and it's the Mexican on the inside has to get out of the way and tuck back in to the rear of the Ferrari, because the Haas of Kevin Magnussen is there, who's trying to get out of the way as best he can. So Perez couldn't do it there either. Sainz at the moment hanging on to this 3rd place for dear life.
Yeah, absolutely. He's just holding on by the skin of his teeth. That Red Bull's so effective with its DRS, as you were saying earlier, and he's got to try and use the high-speed section of the second half of the lap to force Perez to sit in his dirty air, give himself a bit of a break before they launch back into the DRS.
And he's not just fighting for himself, remember, he's also fighting for Charles Leclerc, his teammate, who's now 10 seconds up the road of these two with just about 12 laps left. Can Perez catch him? Because it looks like he's about to pass Sainz.
Well, we heard the Ferrari going into turn 1 there, giving it a heavy bit of recharge on the braking and then giving it a big punch of deployment as they run up to turn 3.
And the clouds overhead looking a little bit greyer as well, and there's nearly contact as Perez darts out at the last minute to the outside line of the turn 3 right-hander. Sainz holds it off, but then Perez does the up and under and now has the inside line alongside Sainz, who has the DRS. It's a drag race down to turn 4. Who wins out? It's Carlos Sainz, but he runs a little bit deep and nearly gets a wheel onto the gravel, side by side once again with Sergio Perez. It's Ferrari versus Red Bull. Sainz has the inside and holds on to that 3rd place for the time being. Sainz in 3rd, Perez in 4th. Straight back to the cricket though, because it's been a wicket.
Yes, and Ben Stokes is out, and that is probably it for England's chances in this test match. 301 for 7, so 70 more still needed to win. But just listen to the reception for Ben Stokes now, out for 155, just top edging a pull to Alex Carey off Josh Hazelwood. So he is out for 155. England still 70 away. They're 301 for 7, and he's getting a standing ovation all the way back to the pavilion, the England captain.
60 of 71 here at the Austrian Grand Prix, and things are really heating up in the battle for third. Carlos Sainz continues to defend for all his life, takes the inside line in turn 3, defends Sergio Perez nicely, but now we're back onto the DRS point on this track, running down to turn 4, but Perez doesn't get it, Sainz does. Perez is trying to get in the toe, Sainz looking in his mirrors, left, right and centre, forces Perez to the outside. The Ferrari holds on once again.
Perez is clearly trying to throw the kitchen sink at Sainz, just moving this way and that, trying to find any way through. He tried the undercut the previous lap. Here's Sainz.
He's like intimidating me.
And he's then tried to take it all the way around the outside of turn 4 on this next lap just to try something different, but Sainz has had the measure of him, and because Perez is getting so far alongside him in the braking zone of turn 3, he's actually going through the DRS trigger point first and giving Carlos Sainz the DRS on the way to turn 4.
Okay, another lap we go. Deep breaths, everybody. Let's see what happens this time around. Sainz still in front then. Through turn 1 we go. Into the second of the DRS zones here. You get it down the main straight and then you get it to the run to turn 3. Sainz moves to the inside and defends. Forces Perez to the outside. But that compromises Sainz's line through the corner. DRS this time will go to Sergio Perez into the run of turn 4. He moves to the outside. Sainz forces him. Can Sainz brake late in the braking zone? No, he can't. Perez going round the outside and finally gets the move done on Carlos Sainz. Sainz is going to fight back though through 5 and into 6, but he doesn't have any more left in him. Perez through finally into third. It took him a few laps in that Red Bull, but he has finally got the better of the Ferrari of Sainz down to 4th.
He made sure that he had his nose behind Sainz crucially into turn 3 as they went over that trigger point for the DRS, and then used the straight line speed to great effect, getting all the way past him into turn 4. And even though he overshot the braking just a little bit, it wasn't enough for Sainz to come back at him.
Really great battle though, and Sainz gave it everything he had, but in the end Perez winning out that one. So Verstappen leads Leclerc, leads Perez now in 3rd, Sainz 4th, Norris the top 5, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Gasly and Albon the top 10, and everyone has been lapped by the way, up to Albon in 10th, Stroll 11th, Ocon 12th, Sargent 13th, Zhou, De Vries the top 15, Magnussen, Bottas, Tsunoda and Piastri, the 19 drivers still remaining in this race, with one retirement coming from the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg.
Albon in 10th is going to be desperately trying to hold on to that single point, because Stroll behind him on a fresh-ish set of mediums has been lapping the best part of a second quicker than him. He's now just over 1 second behind him. With 8 laps left to go in this race, the superior straight line speed of that Williams is going to be his only defence, really. We'll see if he can cling on for that final point.
Down through the gears, this is the sound of Lance Stroll through turn 3, 4th gear, 5th gear, getting up to over 250 kilometres an hour down the straight that approaches turn 4. Stroll currently 11th, looking at the back of the Williams of Alex Albon, just about 0.8 of a second between these two in the fight for the final points-paying position.
The stewards should have a look at that. He was intimidating me a lot.
It was intimidating, that's what he said. I was wondering what Sainz said earlier on the radio. So that was after their incredible battle there. Well, do you think Perez was intimidating? And can you be penalised for that?
So what he's referring to there is at a few points down the straights, which are very long here and obviously very high speed, the two cars were sort of creeping towards each other and then jumping apart as they got close to contact, and both drivers really were trying to intimidate each other by moving as close as they could, just crowding them for space and trying to get them to lift, and they came extremely close to contact on a few occasions. So Sainz will be hoping that maybe optimistically he might get a penalty out of that, but I think it's a bit unlikely. It looked like it was pretty even between the two of them.
One of the closest battles out on track now is over, just the 1 point, but in this midfield pack it is so crucial. Albon currently holds it, but into turn 4 the faster Aston Martin of Lance Stroll goes round the outside, but there's a little bit of contact with the right rear of Stroll's Aston Martin and the front left of Alex Albon's Williams. Nothing major coming of it, but Stroll gets the move done and up into 10th.
Yep, so Stroll gets that done pretty decisively in the end with his fresher tyres. Looking back towards the front, and Perez on that last lap, he was only able to match the time of Leclerc. So after losing all that time in that intense battle with Sainz, he's going to have to turn up the pace quite significantly with just over 6 laps to go. At the moment, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to catch the Ferrari.
I think also he might be about to lose his fastest lap to his teammate. We've got, 6 laps to go, and Verstappen will know that Perez has fastest lap. At the moment, the gap would be 79 points in the championship because Perez has that fastest lap. If Verstappen catches it back, obviously that's another nail in the coffin of Perez's already dead championship hopes.
Oh, sadly. Well, wait and see. Verstappen probably gearing up then for a fast lap. This one is not lighting up the timing screens. Verstappen then leading by over 22 seconds. And there's been another wicket at Lord's. Ellie Oldroyd.
Yes, it's Ollie Robinson who is out trying another big shot, but caught by Steve Smith at deep square leg. 302 for 8 now. Stuart Broad is still on 11, and Stephen Finn, I think probably the cards are on the table now, or the writing is on the wall, or something like that anyway.
It feels that way, doesn't it? Yeah, 69 runs needed to win for England. Ollie Robinson trying to hack it towards the grandstand, could only get a top edge, and Steve Smith, who made a mistake earlier dropping Ben Stokes in a very similar position at deep backward square leg, made no mistake this time. So Australia are honing in on their target. They'd have been worried for a long time there whilst Ben Stokes was at the crease, but now Josh Tongue playing his second game in Test match cricket could be an even bigger hero than when he took 5 wickets at Lord's against Ireland a few weeks ago.
It's looking more and more unlikely now, though. 302 for 8, 69 to win. Looks a long way off.
Well, it looks a long way off in the cricket. It's a long way off for anybody to try and get on terms with Max Verstappen. Lap 66 of 71 here at the Austrian Grand Prix, and he leads by well over 20 seconds to Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. Sergio Perez is third, Sainz is fourth in front of the McLaren of Lando Norris. Then comes Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Gasly and Stroll, the top 10, and last of the point scorers, Albon, Ocon, Sargent, Zhou, De Vries, the top 15. Then comes Magnussen, Bottas, Tsunoda and Piastri, who you can hear now in 19th, battling away with the 4 cars in front of him. Heading the queue is Kevin Magnussen's Haas in 16th, who is in a nice battle with the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas. And into turn 4, the right-hander, the downhill braking zone, has to strategically get out the way of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, who was lapping him. He does so without losing the spots to the Alfa Romeo of Bottas, who just has to tuck in behind, but is lurking right in the mirrors of Magnussen, and then Tsunoda and Piastri just a couple more tenths behind Bottas. Bad news though for Kevin Magnussen. Add him to the list for track limits penalties, and a 5-second time penalty. Kevin Magnussen, that will have to be served once he crosses the line at the end of this race.
Can add Logan Sargent to that as well. He had a 5-second time penalty a little bit earlier for a similar infraction. On board now with Lando Norris, and he just dips over the white line. We haven't seen any notification of a penalty, and yeah, he's just the one offence there, so we'll keep an eye on that on the FIA screens. But the battle rages on for 16th. Bottas up the inside of Magnussen, and is that Tsunoda trying to stick his nose up the inside as well, but he can't quite get the move done on Magnussen, who pops open his DRS, coming back towards Bottas. Meanwhile, Tsunoda pops out on the outside in the run to turn 4, and he gets the move done all the way around the outside in the braking zone. Very neat from him, taking advantage of Magnussen being held up by Bottas.
It was really nice racing this. Bottas 16th, Tsunoda 17th, Magnussen 18th, Piastri 19th. It's a shame that is, but no points. And maybe adds a bit of fuel for the argument that should we add up a few more points further down in this tight mid-pack?
It's for honour. It's for honour and pride. That's what these guys are doing. It's brilliant though. You know, if you can't race for points, then you know they're still here to fight wheel to wheel and battle it out. And this is one of the best circuits for it. Piastri just sitting on the back of Magnussen now as they come through the final sector. He's going to be the next one to have a crack at the Haas.
Yeah, the Haas, and a reminder, Magnussen will have to serve a 5-second time penalty as well. Once he crosses the line, that will be added to his time. So I'm sure the McLaren team have told Oscar Piastri that, but he'll want to get past him on the track. Either way, for glory and pride, as Jack mentions. Oh, here's our race leader, Max Verstappen.
Start to cool the tyres.
Oh, I prefer the box.
We don't feel the risk of boxing is worthwhile.
You've got 24 seconds in the lead. Come on.
He makes a valid point. That's Max Verstappen, with the average pit loss time being just over 20 seconds. He would come out, well, at least 3.5 seconds or so in front of Leclerc, but it is a bit tight, especially if something goes wrong.
It is, but you generally feel, especially on a track like this with so much DRS, it would be pretty easy for him to get past Leclerc, but then you have the risk of wheel-to-wheel battle. They are limbering up. They are looking at boxing Verstappen, and he gets the call on the radio. And the mechanics running out to the Parc Fermé bridges, the fencing that they're setting up for the podium ceremony, and just shoving them out the way to give Verstappen a clear run into the box. So they're going for it here.
Verstappen then, in he comes. Average pit time loss is 20 seconds, and he comes in with 23.7 seconds a lead over Charles Leclerc. So this will be quite a high-pressure pit stop there, and he pulls into the box. The mechanics immediately go to work, and they're putting the soft tyre on, and this could be, to quote Andrew Benson from earlier, the nail in the coffin for Sergio Perez's fastest lap point that he wants. Let's see where Verstappen comes out. Leclerc coming around the final corner now is on the main straight, but Verstappen is going into turn one already, and he puts his foot to the floor, and on that soft rubber will have more than a gap to Charles Leclerc in second. 4 seconds, in fact.
We're going to have a qualifying lap to enjoy then on the last lap of this Grand Prix from Verstappen, and adding insult to injury, Perez has received a warning flag for track limits, so if he does it one more time in these last 2 laps, that'll be a 5-second penalty, and he would lose the place to science if that happens.
And I think we've also seen, not for the first time, who effectively runs the Red Bull team. And it's the man in the cockpit of the #1 car.
Stamping his authority once again, but underlining just how superior Verstappen is on track. A better run of things for Ferrari. Leclerc on the podium, if he can hold on to it in these last few laps, would be much needed, with the Ferrari CEO watching on in the garages. Leclerc hasn't been on the podium since the 4th race of the season back in Azerbaijan, in Baku. So this will be much needed as we start then the final lap. Verstappen leads Leclerc, Perez, Sainz, Norris the top 5, Alonso, Hamilton, Russell, Gasly, Stroll the top 10, Albon, Ocon, Sargent, Zhou and De Vries the top 15, Bottas, Tsunoda, Piastri, Magnussen the 19th and last of the drivers in this field, with the other Haas of Nico Hülkenberg compounding a bad day for the American outfit out of this race, the only retirement.
So Max heading up to turn 4 now. He's already setting some purple mini sectors through the first sector. He's got a little bit of traffic coming through turn 6, so, you know, somewhat of a challenge for the #1 car. But looking pretty imperious. He uses all the entry curbing on the way into 6 to open up the corner. The Orange Army are going absolutely wild as he does this final lap. And, as you say, stamps his authority not only on his team, but on this race.
The grandstands are already erupting. The orange flares have been set off by the Orange Army, who have come out in force to support the 2-time champion. Max Verstappen crosses the line and makes it 10 consecutive wins in Formula 1 for Red Bull Racing, and it's another win to extend his championship lead in a rather ominous year for the Dutchman. He finishes ahead of Charles Leclerc, who gets back onto the podium in second. This is the sound of Sergio Perez, who recovers from 15th on the grid to finish 3rd on the podium in a day of damage limitation, as the orange flares erupt and smoke onto the track. The visibility is starting to get rather clouded, but Verstappen also managed to get the fastest lap as well.
That, I believe, is the full sweep. Great job.
Classy, Max. Very, very classy. Well done, mate.
Yeah, that was an amazing race, guys. Car was on fire. Really, really good. And great pit stops too. So very good.
Fantastic work once again then from Max Verstappen, who wins the Austrian Grand Prix. And we can now head back over to Lords and join the Test Match special team with Jonathan Agnew. Coverage for the Grand Prix will continue for those on the BBC Sports website and app.
Thank you, Harry. It's Alistair Bruce-Ball here presenting 5 Live Sport this Sunday afternoon live at Lord's. Max Verstappen dominant in Formula One, the Australian cricket team dominant in this Ashes series, now just one